I got some. So it's Sunday. We just had a massive cold front blow through. Lots of cold rain and lots of cold wind. We're gonna head out to a local lake, try out for some catfish, bass, bluegill, whatever's biting. So join me on my adventures. I'll see you guys out on the water. So here we are at the lake. Let's see if we catch anything. The wind's blowing up on this bank, so that should help us out. So we're using some of this fiber nuggets, the power cheese. This stuff's pretty good for stocked cats. I never use it for wild catfish, but this lake here is stocked every 2 years with catfish, so it works pretty well here. This is one of the only dough baits that actually works, for me at least. All that other stuff like magic bait, that doesn't work all that well. So I'm doing some bass fishing as well. I'm going to use my go-to color, which is this dark blue with flecks. The Senko. These can pretty much catch anything. So while walking around, I found these cool fossils on the rocks. Looks like a bunch of corals. This place used to be a shallow sea, so there's a bunch of these type of fossils lying around. Getting a bite on this rig here. Took my bait. Take a look at the size of this clam. It's huge. This is a normal size one here, and this is that really giant one. I've never seen one this big before. It must be really old. That's pretty cool. Let's get back in the water. Over to the other side of the lake. I fished that whole dam face from one end to the other. I didn't get any bites, any bass. I thought they might be in deeper water since we had that big temperature drop overnight. So I moved over to this side of the lake, see if we can get anything. It's a little more shallow here, but I am on a dock where it gives me a little more access to deeper water. We'll see if there's any bass on this side of the lake. Since we had that big temperature drop, they pretty much got lockjaw. We had air temperature drop, and then we had cold rain as well, which the air temperature drop isn't too bad, but once the cold rain hits the water, that really turns off the bite. But we'll see if we can get anything. We'll keep trying. The thing to do when that happens is just to constantly move and try new areas, and you might be able to find some active fish. So let's see what happens. So like I was mentioning before, we just had a cold front come through. It was a pretty big temperature drop, about 12 degrees from one day to another. And this type of fishing, it kind of slows down. We had some rain as well, some cold rain, and that kind of kills the bite. And this type of fishing, you kind of just got to move around and try different spots. I'm trying for bass, I'm trying for bluegill, I try for catfish, but pretty much nothing's biting. So we'll just keep trying and see what happens. I got some. It's a largemouth bass. Hit the Senko. Little guy, but it's nice to finally get something. Alright, we got the hook out. Here's a little bass, about 12 inches. Pretty small, but still fun to catch. Let's throw him back in. There he goes. See if we can get anything else. Getting a bite on this worm rig. Let's see if we have anything on here. Oh, there we go. Something's on. Looks like bass, a small bass maybe. Oh no, it's a pretty big. It's a pretty big shell cracker. A red ear sunfish. So it's pretty huge. This thing hit the night crawler or the worm rig. A pretty big one. I would say about maybe 11 inches, 10 inches. Bigger than hand size. I mean, once you can lip these, that's a pretty big fish. So I think I might keep this one and cook it. So we'll knock it out, get it out of its misery, bleed it out, and then get it on in the cooler. But yeah, it's a really beautiful fish. So this is a red ear sunfish. A lot of people confuse these with bluegill. They're not bluegill. The way you can tell the difference is that the red ear has this little orange or red flap, colored flap on his side of his head. That's the main way to tell the difference between a red ear and a bluegill. These guys hang more towards the bottom and they eat a lot of snails. Bluegill are more general feeders. These guys focus a lot on snails and hanging out towards the bottom of the lake or river. Now that we have this guy, I'll head on home and cook him up. I'll see you guys later. So I'm back home. It's the next day. I cleaned the sunfish. I filleted them out. These little sunfish clean up just pretty much like any other fish. They're fairly easy to fillet. Since I only got the one fish and it's not that much meat, I decided to make some sushi with it. That way I can stretch out the meat and get a meal out of the one little sunfish I caught. I have all my ingredients here, so let's go ahead and get started. So since these are freshwater fish, I'm not going to eat them raw. That carries a high risk of parasites. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fry them up in a little bit of flour so they have a little bit of crunch to them. I'm going to cut them into strips and then go ahead and fry them up. So like I mentioned before, it's not a good idea to eat freshwater fish raw. It carries a high risk of parasites. There are ways to make them safe if you freeze them for a couple of hours. Other than that, it's just safer to cook them up and not eat them raw. Eating them raw, it's too dangerous, I would say. You can go ahead and get a bunch of parasites. So now that they're cut up in strips, I'm going to dust in them a little bit of flour and then fry them up. So here we have the finished product. Take a look. As you can see, it was not too much fish, but you can make a whole meal out of it. So I'll go ahead and eat. I made some eel sauce to go with it as a dipping sauce. So I'll go ahead and try it. So it came out really good. Go ahead and recommend you guys try it out. It's really easy to make, and it stretches the small fish quite a bit, so you can make a whole meal. Thank you for joining me, and I'll go ahead and finish my meal, and join me on the next adventure.